Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Breakneck Podcast. Today, we are very lucky to have Joe Alicata, one of my favorite product people. And, I'm saying this obviously out loud, but it's totally true. I've known Joe for a very long time. He helped us start our last business as an advisor that went very well, almost 100% because of Joe. That part. But Joe's been all kinds of places. I want to let you give a little background about where you've been and what you've seen, because you had major, great positions both in media at companies like Google, and now you're starting your own company. So I kind of want to just let you take it from there on what is your story.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt, and super excited to be with you guys today. And also to take all the credit for the success of previous companies you were with, Matt. That makes a lot of sense to me. The no, my you know I've seen so much, I think, over the course of what feels like a 20-year career. I cut my teeth racking and stacking gear for the Walt Disney Internet Group post Starwave acquisition. At a time when product wasn't even a thing inside of media orgs. I ran product development teams. After that, what now would be called DevOps stint. And that was just about engineers, designers, customer service, everybody just getting together, trying to build the best thing for sports fans. um, but learned a lot about scaling, learned a lot about monetization at that point. This was the era of a lot of the digital properties becoming much more than just marketing engines for linear TV, being actual businesses in and of themselves. Um, uh, did much of the same from a monetization standpoint for Vox Media, but it was really a very different model. It was more of the community model, and that's where I saw the power of you know uh, starting a new brand from scratch, or new-ish at the time that I joined. It certainly SB Nation had existed for a long time, but a bunch of new brands were getting acquired, and some being incubated within the organization. And as much as product management became a thing, it also just became much more about people in general, building a community, whether that was inside the organization or outside the organization, and really kind of figuring out how to support new models of storytelling, new models of monetization. I founded an ad network inside of Vox Media that still exists today called Concert. It was all about, how do creators and these organizations actually monetize. And then I spent a bunch of time trying to figure out kind of what voice and this new paradigm really looked like, from working with the Wiseline team to then joining Google as someone trying to figure out this transition of the smart display platform, and what that should really look like. And I was enamored with this concept that voice was really going to be the paradigm that users were interacting with in an extremely different way, especially as kind of non-native voice. Like, I grew up, learning to type on the computer and interacting all through chat, and all of a sudden voice became this paradigm that you're seeing with, I think a lot about the early versions of FaceTime really changing how, or pick your voice consumer platform, Snapchat or whatever, um, really changed that paradigm. And also, I think the Google experience taught me, the power of things like evals and how to work with ranking teams, really massive user bases. And that took me to where I am today, which is we founded back in January a company called Ava, which is a family operating system, essentially, where we're really trying to unburden all of the daily stress that falls on parents of especially younger children. Think elementary school children, where the idea there's 30 hours a week of invisible labor that goes to the stress and of parenting, specifically around this kind of coordination and complexity of essentially running the household. We want every parent to have a an AI COO helping them in their household. And so I'm trying to bring all of that experience back together here with that.
I'm reading through your resume on LinkedIn right now, and it's just like
Oh God.
Disney, ESPN. You spent like a little while at Chartbeat, Vox. I was a big believer in Vox, and everyone from Vox has done very well. Uh, and it's just like product after product. I remember like you couldn't go anywhere without Chartbeat being on a screen in
It's true.
media. And it became like the main way people understood their business. And so I can see how that transitions into something like visual search. It wasn't about looking up stats. It was about seeing them and having them displayed in public areas. What do you think is different about voice and using voice chats? Because that's a big area of contention. Just in my own product strategy, I know you and I talk about a lot. It, well, they can just type or they can just click a button. It's like, yeah, but they're not going to. So what have you seen so far? And you're using them with beta partners and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a great point. So we've got a base of alpha users right now on Ava, and it's been so interesting to look at the differences. A lot of the differences in these modalities depends on the demographic of the user base. Um, I would say our age group here is not the typical demo that is super comfortable in voice. We didn't grow up talking into our phones, but you are seeing the transition happening, I think, differently now. So I'll talk about the way I saw it maybe 5 years ago. It was very narrowly focused on younger demographics that grew up with FaceTime or kind of different means of recording and passing around video, and they were super comfortable talking to the phones. Um, Now, what I think you're seeing is because of the power of a lot of these foundation models, you're able to get feedback from in real time from these voice conversations that are making it so the demos like our age group here has transitioned because it's a much more comfortable environment. It's not this weird, like, I don't know, this is strange. I'm recording something and sending it off into the ether. It's more of like I'm having a natural conversation. Now, from a product strategy standpoint, what is incredible about that is you get to glean so much context out of that voice conversation. Tone, speed, um, all the kind of sentiment signals, in addition to the content, and people are just more free flowing than, say, a good example is our onboarding for Ava. We're not asking 100 questions where you're filling in a box of what are the names of your children, what are this. We're just asking a bunch of open-ended questions, and then I get to, on the back end, dissect all of that and store pieces differently. Some of it's long-term memory, some of it's short-term, some of it's a story. But that can all happen behind the scenes. And that, so from a user perspective, I think they're seeing the benefit, and it's just a comfortable paradigm.
Man and I we're on the same page as you about this. Um, but you got all this rich information coming into you, and as a product person, you're like, "Oh my God, this is great!" It's like being handed a huge data set, and you go, "Oh, there's going to be some awesome stuff in here."
Yeah.
Is there a danger that you kind of get distracted by sort of all the cool shit that could be in there? It's got to be easy to get distracted. How are you going? I suppose more broadly, the bigger question is, you've got all this unstructured information that can be structured. And how do you sort of stay on track or even work out what is the right stuff to stay focused on?
It's an awesome question, and I think there's two sides to it. One is, can you get lost in all the cool stuff? Yes, absolutely. You have to keep yourself on point of what are the problems we're trying to solve. Ava's a great example. Like, I can do so much with the multi-agent infrastructure that we built, for example, to extract information out of voice, text, email, and put that information, put those events, put those reminders on your calendar. That could be used in a million different use cases. I don't want to look at anything that doesn't have to do with family context. So I don't want to look at, you know, anything that has to do with, you know, some other financial things that are going on in your family. Like, there's lots you have to be good about throwing away as part of your prompt engineering for these types of things. Um, the flip side of it is it's okay to be a little broad, we've found, because um, number one, it's so cheap to store this stuff. You can go back and make changes later. Like I can store, we have, massive vector database with tons of memories about each user. I don't have to use all those memories. I can prune them later. I have this slight notion of kind of a sliding scale for short term versus long term. And I can decide something it actually shouldn't be long term once I see how users are how it's used as part of the context for other queries from the users. So um, I would say generally yes, you're absolutely right. You have to stay focused. You have to catch yourself on like, hey, is this just cool? Is this novelty? Or what's the real wedge use cases? And one of the ways I've been able to do that um, with Ava is really spending an excruciating amount of time looking at what users are asking of the platform. We have the benefit of a really nice alpha user base. We've been very light in onboarding, which the cool side of that is that we're seeing just how users want to interact because they're just trying things. And I think so you have to spend a lot of where you would have spent a lot of time in Chartbeat before. Now you have to spend a lot of time in the actual prompts in your whatever observability platform you're using
Chartbeat for
matters so much.
agents, I think would
Sure.
be just free
Oh
money.
my
Go
God,
go
free.
pitch it, Joe.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll go get Tony on board.
um,
I have sorry, just one more. Same question, but at a slightly different level. Parenting, running a family, the family OS is just so complex, right? And it's
Complex,
so
yes.
unstructured. And so as you sit there as a product minded person, you're like, "Okay, I'm going to build something of great value for this
Mm.
completely unstructured world. We've got AI, which is great because it can handle the unstructured world. But how did you even begin to think about where you were going to start in terms of some sort of structure that you would say to people, hey, it's a thing that does X and Y and Z? So how did you kind of work out the starting point for Ava?
It's such a great question, and this is where my co-founder Laura did a ton of research, and I think to the product development, product like principle point, um, the start of a project doesn't need to be any different than it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You still have to do your research. You still have to figure out and have a way to pressure test concept and figure out, okay, here's a question around here's something that users it's actually a pain point, or here's something that's a pain point that they're saying is a pain point, but it's not really, it's just kind of, they have to deal with it. So we started from a base of research, just like you always have. I think the difference now, though, is we were able to very quickly, in our case, 12 weeks, build a full app that we could get in users' hands. Instead of, we did the normal, um, putting mock-ups in front of users, build a bunch of prototypes, and that was helpful to further refine things. And then once we had the kind of ounce of conviction, we were able to switch to build very quickly. And I think so that's a little bit that I think is the same from a research perspective. And then what's new is just jump to prototyping, which I think is uh, probably one of the is this in my head the second most important skill for a product person these days. The first is evals. I think evals is a new skill that you have to be able to be good at writing. To your earlier question of like, how do you find the needle in the haystack? Like you do that through evals. You do that
can
through
can you
through
spend maybe 30 seconds just with a general overview of what an eval is and why it's important?
Absolutely. I think I can spend even less than 30 seconds on that, honestly. An eval is just a it, it we're living in this world where software that we're building is so non-deterministic compared to where it used to be. Now there's pieces that are deterministic, but generally speaking, you don't you need a way to measure if I put in X, will I get Y, something that I recognize out of it? And that X and Y, it can be whatever modality, it doesn't matter. But evals are simply the structuring an input and then scoring that output so you understand, okay, did I get out of this prompt, query, interaction, whatever it is, what I think it should be. And
Give us an example from like
yeah,
Google or today, I would
yeah.
Ava, whatever.
An example is when it's Google's the perfect example because it's very simple. We all know what a good search looks like, right? You search for um, wireless headphones that have long battery life. You know that you want to get like the result that you get is needs to be high quality results that are in that case needs to be a set of results that show you wireless headphones. They can't be wired. They need to have long battery life, not short battery life. Like it's it's really that simple. Now it gets very hard for new agents to write good evals. For example, you're trying to make sure you can accurately answer. In our case, I have a 4-year-old who's having sleep regressions. Give me some ideas and how to help them or just I'm super frustrated. I have a 4-year-old with who's not sleeping through the night. Like whatever, however that query comes in, the output has to be okay. How do you make sure the response is relevant? Okay, it has to talk about a 4-year-old, not a 14-year-old. It has to talk about things that impact sleep, not things that impact random activities. So there's it takes a lot of practice to get this right, but it really is magic when you do, because then you're able to score those and run them constantly as you make changes.
So I'm going to say something that I'm tossing around, I believe, and I want your feedback on it,
Great.
is that I feel that in business, there are these situations which are similar to evals. Like we would call them maybe outcomes or something
Yeah.
like that. For instance, a CRM is a set of people saying that they're going to close a certain amount of deals by the end of a quarter or a year. And then they're able to go in and we're testing, did they do that, right? That kind of exists. There are tickets that are coming in from customers that need to be closed. And like, did this agent close them, right? And at Google, obviously, you always had the search engine, which is like the major
Right.
thing. Like, did your thing get the expected click rate and satisfaction of the client as measured by these metrics? So there was always a endpoint of satisfaction or non-satisfaction. And I think like and I bring this up. This is super sophisticated product people have Ian and Joe, but like is part of your app about creating that universe of these repeatable outcomes or these repeated situations where you can eval. And Ian, I bring this up because I think like that's kind of maybe what you're pressing towards is that how do you focus down? Where does your app actually live in this infinite space of LLM output? And how do you kind of like direct the user into the strength of where you're going to be successful because you have these defined outcomes or these evals that you're successful with.
And I'll just I totally agree with that. I think the thing that makes it even more challenging in a business context, outcomes are generally agreed upon, right? And
Mhm.
and so it's less about satisfaction, which is an interesting word, versus outcome. But when you go into the consumer world and even SMB world a little bit as well, successful outcome isn't always as clear. And so I imagine, Joe, you need so much more conviction around, yeah, this is where we need to kind of push the user or deliver results to the user. So yeah, I have the same question. I'm intrigued.
That's at first I thought this was going to be the point of the show that we got to argue about weighted pipelines. So I'm really disappointed you didn't go there completely. Um,
It's just
but
a weighted pipeline of users who are going to use the feature that you built. Everything sales, Joe.
exactly, exactly. Look, it's so there's a couple of things. I think I guess I would argue that you're mixing a little bit non-deterministic with deterministic outcomes, right? Where there certainly you look at metrics, but evals are not about the hard metrics. It's not about usage. Evals are about you as the, product product people are never going to go away, in the sense that someone has to have the, especially in consumer apps, there has to be taste associated with these apps. So evals a little bit are a an indication of the taste of the group of people that built the thing. And this
Mhm.
is the argument behind like a lot of the foundation model issues, when LLMs, first started to become popular, was, yeah, they're just spitting back the thing that the people that wrote them told it to. Um, so I think from a direct outcome standpoint, the you do have to mix the interaction models a little bit in these consumer apps, and certainly that's what we're doing with Ava. There are very specific flows through the app. For example, we're listening to your Gmail, looking for events, putting those events in a pending event queue, and there's a process for you to review those, decide what you like, and then there's a feedback loop that creates kind of additional personalization so that you're seeing better and better events every time, and they're showing up in your, so that is, we push people through that particular workflow. We know that's a wedge use case. We're going to push you in, and we're going to send you a push notification saying, hey, you have events to review. You should come in and review them, right? And through this idea of progressive trust, we will get better and better at just doing that automatically. But in the beginning, we're saying we want you to do it. The kind of complete flip side of that is, yeah, people can ask any question they want in this voice interface. Um, it's about us having the right level of awareness of what, and programming that awareness into the actual application, into the instructions, into the prompts, into the agents, so that we can be clear to the user, we can give you this answer, but this isn't necessarily what we're good at,
No,
or
and I
all the
think
way to the extreme of we're not even going to answer this.
I think it's you gave me the exact answer that I didn't expect. I had no idea what you're going to say, but like the form of your answer is exactly what I was looking for. That there is like a skeleton of your app, of a deterministic, hard, repeatable, actually looks like an app maybe, or looks
Yep.
like a data
Right.
structure,
UI
right?
wise.
And your user is frequently kind of being kind of pushed back into those types of flows where they can confirm and validate that they've had a successful use. And that's my point is, I think that's exactly what Google does. Google has search results. It could do anything, but it's going to push you back to its search results, which give it a huge advantage that they can measure, obviously monetize, but then also
Right.
measure success in like, so every new AI product built at Google has this way of determining if it was good, not just usage, not just did they
Mhm.
interact and burn tokens for us, but is it good? And I think what you're pointing to is that you are building that, and then that's growing inside of your application as users, might change, it might have different things, but there isn't
Totally.
just I talk to an app and it does anything I want. It's this
Right.
kind of this push towards this repeatable outcome.
And this is why vertical AI is the thing. Whether it's SaaS, to your point, Ian, whether it's SaaS, consumer, it doesn't matter. Google's the perfect example of it. Like, you look at the search page and you see a bunch of vertical teams. You see shopping, you see image search, you see kind of raw search results. Even when you look at the actual result of your search, you can see kind of, horizontal carousels of different experiences. And so vertical is the thing, vertical whatever is the thing that is really going to help you win, where you are narrowly focused.
So we're all learning here, right? The way you described it, Matt, makes me sort of think of we're building a product that's a little bit like the human body, right? We've got bones which are structured. If we didn't have bones, we'd just collapse on the ground. But then we have flesh as well, right? So we've got to be able to pick up a glass or whatever. So we're now building products that are structurally sound, deterministic old school software, and then we have the more flexible probabilistic, and we're trying to put the two together. And so it's cool that we're learning to do that, but we're also doing that in the context where the consumer, the user, is also learning. So what patterns are you seeing? What learnings, what observations are you having with kind of the families that are new versus maybe what you might have seen 4 or 5 years ago with deterministic solutions?
It's a great question. I think uh, trust matters more than it ever has. Um, a good question that we answer all the time is, isn't Gemini just going to do what you guys are doing? Isn't ChatGPT just going to be able to do this? And the answer is, they'll be able to do some of it probably, but this is a purpose-built experience. And I think what maybe has surprised me a little bit is users are, and especially this demo of parents are looking for a community, and this is a community. We took an approach that was very much similar to kind of the Vox Media approach, where um, Laura was building a community, while I was building a product, and then these two pieces essentially met. And I think that it creates, engenders that like ownership, it engenders that trust. There's other parents that are using it. Now, how does that scale? That'll be interesting to see how it scales. But I don't know that um, community-driven consumer apps in this way were a thing that this demo thought about before, right? It was more so, um, all right, I've got to use this silly app to manage my kids' soccer schedule. I'm just going to go use it. I don't have a choice, right? They're not kind of part of that movement. But we're seeing people, you know, find all sorts of different uses for even some of these utility wedge cases that we have. They're, taking these events and, putting them on a work calendar, inviting a nanny to the event to make sure that they're on the nanny's calendar as well. And then we're seeing behavior that's, I think, surprising us that we're seeing 5+ minutes of engagement for these daily active users. They're just having conversations to help kind of also explore what these AI models can do for them in their use cases. So that I think is also surprising us, that we didn't expect so much exploration to be happening inside of this experience, and that's really positive.
Joe, just for my own slide deck graph future, I need to put some of these in pitch slides. What do you think is the this is direct data collection. What do you think is the ratio between the amount of user input you would get from a normal text app, or maybe someone clicking buttons, navigating, screens in an application, versus the type of things that you're seeing right now? Because a 5-minute interaction, I don't know, that's 500 or 600 words you're going to get out of that person, very
Yeah.
likely. What do you think the ratio is?
Oh, man, it's probably, when we compare someone who attempted to execute a query via text chat to someone who attempted to execute a similar kind of concept in voice chat, I mean, you're talking number of words, at least 10x difference in the number of words. I mean, and then to my earlier point, that's so much incredible context for us because you're mentioning other things. If you're asking for, help making dinner tonight, um, that you're not typing in, I need a recipe for tonight. You're saying, hey Ava, can you help me make dinner tonight? Lauren's still sick. I've got to pick up both kids. This is all real, by the way. And I did do grocery shopping yesterday, and it's like that. Then there's okay. There's all sorts of context that comes from that, that is then valuable within the session and even for subsequent sessions.
That's incredible. I think like living through like the big data revolution, where you went, essentially my definition of big data was going from a very highly curated and structured data store, like a SQL data store, to you had these schemaless data stores where we were just dumping these huge blobs of data in, and we were going to deal with it later. and we were going to do after the fact analysis. And it feels like there's a similar type of thing, which is instead of saying this is what the user needs to do in my app now, which of course you can then plan out and be very deterministic in, what you're going to say is, I'm going to have non-deterministic, this wide open thing, but I'm going to make up for the difficulty of the you talked about evals and non-deterministic by the fact that I'm going to get so much more out of that user, and I can put so much more into that user if I'm having conversations with them away from the screen. They don't need to be looking down. They can be talking, they can be cooking or driving. And I'm just going to have so much more time with that user than I ever had before, so that all of these other difficulties that are popping up are made up for by the fact that I just have so much more information, which I feel was like the thing that made big data work. It was so much messier, but you just at the end of the day, it was like it got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to do these after the fact lookups and faster to the point where we have AI now. And that made up for all the messiness and the non-determinism that had to come up front.
There's a danger in that as well. If we kind of really open the aperture to suck in as much as possible, I think there's two challenges. One is, as users, we need some form of user model. Like, what is this thing? First of all, so I get confused. And then the second one is just okay, you're asking me a bunch of questions or you're encouraging me to have this conversation. I mean, that's not what you told me this user, this product, this value transaction was going to be about. And I know we're way too smart to fall into those traps, but I can see this goes to the bigger question of what are the best user interactions, and voice is so phenomenal. But it's not the only thing that is kind of viable and useful here. So maybe I'll swing this into a bit of a question, Joe.
Yeah.
Structured, unstructured conversations and interactions. My sense is we've got these great tools, and chat interactions, they work way better than they used to, but they're not it. Voice is great too. Do you think ultimately we fast forward some period of time, let's say 2 years, that we're going to create some new types of user interactions, or we're just going to take the interaction types and experiences we have and mix them up together in the right way to get to the right recipe?
I'll cheat a little bit and say I think both are true. So I totally agree with you. It's not one or the other. And this is why from day one of Ava, we were building with the native voice models that Gemini was offering. And originally it was native voice and video. Now there's the new model that we worked with the DeepMind team on, which is very, very focused on native audio, but it's not doing speech to text and then text back to speech, and then so you're not getting latency, you're not losing context. It's so much more rich what you can extract from that. But you're absolutely right. I am such a huge believer in mixing these interface elements. So and within right within the stream, just because you're saying something in voice doesn't mean the voice should be response. The example that I always use, that we ran into a lot on the original Google Assistant, was if you ask for a recipe, in what world would you want a recipe to be read back to you? I can't even remember the current step of the recipe. Never mind 4 steps ahead. I need to have, you know, 2 crushed cloves of garlic with, a quarter of I can't, doesn't make any sense, right? So user asks Ava for a recipe, you get a nice, beautiful recipe card on the screen, an indication that there's the recipe. You have to mix these modalities. You can't lock in. Same thing for approve, like this doesn't exist yet in the app, but we want to add commerce abilities. We're going to always want a final like approval unless this is something you've done 100 times and you've given authorization to. So we're going to want you to click the screen, not say yes, because maybe you said, yeah, but wait, and like that gets misinterpreted. Like you're going to want to press the button to stay. So the modality mixing, I think, is super important, which then will create new UI paradigms, to your point. And this is why I cheated, but I really feel strongly like new paradigms are going to come out of this. We're all of a sudden going to see like some new concept of, okay, well, this is how I expect, approvals to happen for commerce flows. It's like the double tap in iOS to bring up Apple Pay. It's like that's just a thing now, but nobody, like 2 years or 5 years ago, none of us realize that that would be the way that we would, we'd be okay with our credit cards being on our phones.
Yeah, that was a big shift, is that you just put your phone near something and click. And it comes back to trust, and building trust is going to be what enables you to release a lot of these different things, because they're only going to play with it and explore all this stuff if it's something they feel is going to pay off for them. Well, we're well over time, of course. We could probably keep you another hour or two, selfishly, but at the end of the episode, what we'd like to do is kind of get a sense of what were the things that happened to you this week, because you released, you were, I saw you, I probably reached out about a week ago when you were the launch partner with Google, Gemini 8 Live API, which cool, very cool. And I was like, oh, Joe, like, oh, damn. That was neat that your app was like the leading edge for the DeepMind team. But what have you seen in the last week? And if you don't have a ready answer, I have mine for the week.
I do have something top of mind, and it's not fun or cool or related to that Gemini thing, but it's a great example of we're still building with a lot of the same tools. So last week, we had the classic database problem. The wake up one morning, why is everything slow? Oh no, it's the database. What's going on? So that's I guess my reason to bring that up is that still happens. We're still at the end of the day building with a lot of these same building blocks. Now, we got to use AI to help us debug a bunch of slow queries that we didn't realize were even happening thanks to a framework that we're using. I won't bore you with all the details. But it was like that. I like using that example to ground everybody that like this is not nobody's vibe coding their way to success here. You still have to have an understanding of some of these really grounded principles that make these apps special. And turns out like that's where we're storing a bunch of session data. So like the app literally didn't work until we resolved that problem. I don't know if that's what you were going for,
That's
Matt,
exactly
but you
what
got a
that is.
real
Yeah.
world answer.
That's good. Ian, what's yours this week?
Mine is actually a Google product. Just came out this morning, or at least I think it came out this morning. It is called Google Learn Your Way. And I have a high schooler and a university student in my household, and we talk about. They're always asking me like, "How did you do in college?" And I'm like, "Well, I didn't do that well when I did engineering because it was all written. We would sit there for 25 minutes, 50 minutes just taking notes. And so I never learned anything in the class. I learned everything afterwards. And what I love about this Google Learn Your Way product is they're taking a topic, whatever it may be, data analytics, and they're presenting the information in 4 different ways. I wrote them down: immersive text, slides and narrative, audio, and mind maps. And I love this idea of being given a piece of information. And Matt's like, I'm going straight to immersive text. That's how I learn. I'm reading it all. I'm going straight to mind maps. So it's a very nascent product, but I love this idea of being able to present information sort of and be able to hold it up and turn it around and understand it the way you want to understand it. So
Yeah,
Google Learn Your Way, go check it out.
that's super exciting. I think one of the things I've noticed in the news in the last couple of weeks is Mississippi went from like the last place reading comprehension to like 8th in the course of 2-3 years, and it was simply by adopting phonics. And I was taught with phonics, and I can read, so pretty. I mean, only like 28% of students can read at their expected grade level. It's really, I mean, as advanced as the United States is, it's really low. It's incredibly low. And so Mississippi basically turned it around, and they did it with evidence-based. But when we think of like phonics as something that was, when I was a kid, there was phonics. We had Hooked on Phonics was like the big thing. And it's like, imagine what we could do if we unleashed. They're building this Colossus cluster in Memphis. I just think of Mississippi, the data centers in Tennessee, and there's a 1 gigawatt power plant in Mississippi to build it, right? And this Mississippi, it's improving. Imagine if you took that level of data collection and reinforcement learning and applied it to just like what would make kids go the fast. What if your eval was how quickly kids learn? If just adopting phonics takes you from last to the top 10, like what could we do with that level? And it's really cool to see Google pushing there. And there's a lot of, I think, idealistic people. My big takeaway for this week is Ian and I, we have lots of like running gags or running controversies in the podcast. If someone has watched every single episode, you'll know that you said it took you 84 days to build 12 weeks, 84 days to build your app, which is Ian's thing is it only takes 90 days to do anything now, which it's over and over again. He keeps winning. And you see him grin during the episode. He's like,
Told you so.
When you said 12 weeks, he like, yep. And so another one is who's going to replace the browser? And I think I was watching Demo Day up until the point where I joined this call. OpenAI has released apps inside ChatGPT. So they demoed Canva, which is obviously part of people's development process, but also Zillow, which I and many of my friends are addicted to looking at people's how much their house is, right? So being able to use ChatGPT as the data entry method, I'm imagining voice as well at some point. They didn't demo that on the part I watched. And then it pulls up the actual Zillow app and you look at it. It really felt like a big movement towards the ChatGPT window going from a chat application to a chat and browser application. And then, of course, they can capture all of the data, all of the search intent, all of the commerce in chat. So ChatGPT's worth, or OpenAI's worth $500 billion this week. And man, they look a lot like they're going to be Google. They have 800 million users. They have their own browser. They have their own search engine. They have huge amounts of adoption. So it's a pretty comprehensive vision at this point.
Did you hear that the apps are just HTML?
Of course, but like, why is Chrome
to your point,
only place we access HTML? It's crazy.
Exactly.
So we've been talking about that. Somebody's got to build a new browser, and we were just like, how is it going to occur? And it looks like, HTML apps inside the chat window. You can go full screen and interact with them as like a native browser experience. So anyway, very cool to see. And I think we're all just going to be much happier in a world where Google has intense competition, because I think Google would do a lot better if they were just forced to push out the things they've been building. So, well, Joe, we really appreciate you on. We've gone extremely long, and it's cool to see you leading yet another wave of technology. So congrats on Ava as a launch partner for Gemini, and I can't wait to use it myself.
Thanks, guys. Super, super cool to be here, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. See you next time, everybody.